Hi Camp Yoshi, this is Matt Gaskins. I work for Rivian in the Special Projects Department, and today I'm going to walk you through how I give a quick tour of the Rivian R1T. One of the things I wanted to highlight is that it's very important to kind of talk about the differences between EVs and internal combustion vehicles. So one of the very first ways that we can address this difference is when you are walking someone through to talk about what's normally up here under the hood. So in a traditional vehicle, you have a big heavy engine, you have it bolted to a transmission. In a 4x4 situation, you also have a transfer case, you have drive lines, you have all this additional stuff like differentials and drive shafts that are normally what's situated right here and then back towards the middle of the vehicle. And one of the things that's really fun to talk about is that in an EV, you not only get this additional storage, which is really incredible. We call this the front trunk, or the frunk is okay too. Not only do you get this additional storage space, but it also dramatically improves the safety of the vehicle. When you think about an internal combustion engine and all this stuff that normally lives up here, in a front end accident, that has to go somewhere. Sometimes it can actually go into the passenger compartment, but regardless of what happens with it, it has to go somewhere. So instead of having an engine that has to drop out or get out of the way in an accident, this is all crumple zone and additional margin of safety for the occupants of the vehicle. That's where I generally like to start, because it really gets the wheels turning, so to speak, in people's minds about how this is really not a traditional truck. And the next thing to talk about as it relates to how it's not different, and always a fun kind of party trick, is this gear tunnel back here. So usually the way that pickup trucks work is that the bed and the body are actually two separate components of the vehicle bolted to the frame. This body is all one solid piece, and it is still mounted to a traditional looking frame, which is where a battery pack is. And by continuously having this body panel here, we're able to use this really unique storage area called the gear tunnel. And actually, I just demonstrated something that's really important, is that if you've been parked here for a while, the car may go to sleep, so to speak, and so the exterior buttons won't really work until you wake it up. And the easiest way to do that is just by opening a door, and hopefully all of the switches will work now. There you go. So that just released the gear tunnel. So what the gear tunnel is, it's a really unique pass-through that goes from one side of the vehicle totally to the other. It's a very unique storage solution that really nothing else on the market can offer, just due to the traditional way that vehicles are constructed. And none of this storage space is wasted. So even here in the gear tunnel doors, we've actually used little pockets to store things like the air compressor hose for airing your tires up, airing up air mattresses or whatever. On the other side is also a first aid kit that nests in that same space. So continuing with the theme of how is this different than traditional vehicles? These are the really first two places where I start. Talk about how you have this incredible storage space, how it's different from a traditional internal combustion vehicle due to the fact that there's no engine. And it's also a natural time to talk about how, due to the lack of all of those things like an engine, a transmission, a transfer case, front rear drive shafts, differentials, you also don't get the same vibration and the same sort of feeling and sensation inside the vehicle of things moving underneath you. So it's a really quiet, serene ride. Obviously, next, it's really fun to talk about the bed. So the bed, when it's in the upright position, has about 4.5 feet of length. But when you fold this down, it's actually 7 feet long, which is longer than most traditional pickups. And the way that that's possible is by these really unique hinges called gooseneck hinges right here that allow for this to be completely flat once it's folded down. So if people haul motorcycles or anything large, you can really fit a lot of stuff back here. The other thing to notice is that it's exceptionally flat. So the wheel wells don't really protrude to the point where it would block your ability to haul plywood or large things like that. It has 4 really solid tie down points that nest here in the bed really nicely. And then, as you'll probably notice, there's also a couple really cool things built in. This is the air compressor. So when you go off-road, as we all know, you should air down your tires every time. And if you want to air back up, you have this built-in compressor. using the supplied air hose and the gear tunnel door, you can connect to this chuck right here, dial up the pressure that you want. Street pressure is 48 PSI, by the way. And once it's connected to the tire on the other side, you just hit play and the air compressor starts, which is really cool. And it will turn itself off at the right PSI. These little doors here are for the gear guard. And what that is it's a way to connect a cable through the bicycle or anything that you're storing in the bed and connect it here to where it locks to the bed and ties in with the security system. So this is actually a camera up here in the bed. Apologize, I'm right by a railroad and an airport. So these cameras are constantly watching your gear, and they will alert people as they kind of mess with your stuff, or if they get near, to say, hey, gear guard is recording you, and this cable will keep your stuff connected really safely. On the other side, you also have some really nice 120 volt outlets that use the battery pack. So these are inverted, so that's just like a traditional plug that you have inside your house. And then this is just an emergency release if someone gets stuck in the bed, and really nice LED lighting in the back. You probably noticed that it does have a tonneau cover that slides out of here. We're gonna go ahead and keep these open all the time just because of some potential challenges. If these get really dirty or whatever, you may have challenges getting them back in, so just leave them open the whole time. You will probably have crossbars on all of your trucks, and the nice thing about the way that these work is that they kind of latch into these cleats really cleanly, where they just click down into place, and then you lift up the tab and the whole thing comes up. You can also attach, and this is one of the reasons I love the gear tunnel so much, this holds 300 pounds, by the way. You have the exact same attachment points up here on the roof. So if you wanted to move crossbars from down there to up here, it's really, really easy to do so, especially when you're standing here. I'm a little vertically challenged myself, so this is a huge, huge benefit. Kind of coming back to the gear tunnel, inside you actually have another 120 volt inverted plug. This is just like a household style plug, so you can use that to power devices. And on the other side you have a traditional 12 volt that's like a cigarette lighter outlet. And then right here, that is actually a pass-through from the back door into, or the back seat I should say, into the gear tunnel. So it's kind of cool where, you know, you can actually have access. Let's say you have a cooler or a bag or something like that you wanted to pull something out of, you can just reach in from the inside. You don't have to get out of the vehicle, which is really nice. So I guess since we're here, it's probably a logical next thing to talk about is the back seat and storage options underneath. So on this side, depending on what trim you get, which all of the ones we're delivering right now are launcher adventure packages, I'm sorry. So they'll have this subwoofer on this side. There are 19 total speakers inside the R1T, which is incredible. But on the other side, you have this huge storage cubby, which is really nice. So one of the themes to talk about is just all the storage you get. Again, with traditional vehicles, you have all this mechanical stuff, including a transmission that normally takes up a ton of room on the interior side. But with it being a completely flat battery pack, we have really incredible storage opportunities back here. Storage in each of the door pockets, which is really nice and generous. Storage here with really, really nice detailing that's not going to get stretched out and kind of gross like a lot of the nets do in traditional vehicles. And then back here, not only do you have USB-C power ports, but you have heated seats that you can turn on. You have the ability to turn on and off the dome lights, which is pretty cool right here. And this is actually just a display for the temperature zones. So this does not really have its own controls. Like, you can't actually adjust the temperatures. You can't really adjust the ventilation other than powering it. So just keep that in mind, that if people are like, how do I change the temperature? You actually have to do it up front. Kind of coming around to the front. Again, really nice storage here. I have a huge water bottle that fits in there really nicely. Really incredible storage right here. This is great for bags, you know, whatever you need quick access to. And then everyone's favorite, or one of their favorites, the Rivian Camp speaker, which actually charges right here. Every time it's plugged in, it nests inside that little storage cubby and is fully charged when you pull it out. If you don't want it, it's a little bit extra storage space, which is kind of nice. You have cup holders here. Really nice storage bin. One thing to note, if you're ever looking for the glove box, this actually does not have one. You have a little bit extra knee room and leg room. So if you're looking for one, it actually is not here. And then to nest this back in, you just slide it just like that, and you'll hear it click. So you know it's good to go. Another little hidden storage compartment, which I really like for sunglasses. Each of the seats has this that folds forward, and you can keep little items in there. Let's go into the infotainment a little bit. So it's a little bit different than what most people are used to because there's no physical buttons other than SOS, emergency, and then of course your window switches. So if you want to come in and say lock the vehicle, it's actually this right here. So we'll go ahead and unlock that. HVAC, everyone wants to know how to turn on the climate. So it's actually right here. So you would tap this on to turn on the air conditioning. It's a little warm, about 80 degrees here. So it's a little toasty in the cabin. So it defaults to AC, and you can just click and drag this around to adjust the vents. As you see, there's nowhere to physically adjust the vents with your hands. It's all done through the UI. Now, a lot of people will say they don't like that. They prefer knobs, they prefer buttons. And one of the things I've been saying to folks is say, yeah, I completely understand, but what if you're driving and you want to adjust this vent over here? In a traditional car, you can't really do that. But if I'm sitting over here in the passenger seat, I can adjust the driver vent, I can adjust everything without having to reach over. So I personally think that this is better and a little bit safer. But you know, people may kind of push back on that. If you want to turn off vents, you just tap. So by tapping that, I just turned it off. By tapping this, I just turned on foot vents. As I mentioned earlier, the rear controls are really more just a display other than the heated seats. So if you want to control the rear, you just toggle over to rear. This is the zone for the high vents. This is the zone for the low vents. It works really well. In fact, I've sat in the back seat and, you know, basically my feet were frozen by the time we got to where we were going because I didn't realize just how powerful those floor vents are. So it's really nice, works really well. You can turn on the rear heated seats as well from up here just by tapping on this screen. And then if you want to toggle back to the front, you can turn on your heated steering wheel, your heated seats, and your cooled seats. The cooled seats and the heated seats are really efficient, so I would definitely leverage those to maintain as much range as possible. They are more efficient than using the HVAC, and they're more targeted, of course. So if you're sitting in a seat that's being heated or cooled, that's a lot more efficient than heating or cooling the entire cabin. So to go through just a couple of these functions, other than HVAC, whatever your last setting was, whether you were using the heated seat or the cooled seat, the icon will remain up here so you can tap that without going into the menu, which is quite nice. Your defroster is always going to be available. This is front, this is rear. The overall format of the UI is that these are static icons. So this is your navigation, your music, your drive modes, which is really important, vehicle information, and then this fifth icon, it actually kind of floats between what the last menu item is that you chose here on these three dots. So if you were last using cameras, for example, this should, here we go, that brings up your cameras. And now as you see this fifth icon, it's actually changed to be your cameras. So even if you tap away from it, when you come back, it will always be there. Now, if you switch back to energy, for example, for charging information, now as you see, even as you toggle off, it stays at energy. So these four are locked down. This one is somewhat configurable in that sense. I personally really like to have cameras as the icon that's up there because it's just a little bit easier. And as you can see, we have a pretty cool 360-degree view camera here. Let me close these doors real quick to give you that really nice, crisp 360-degree view, and the front is still open, so it renders a little bit funny, but actually let me show you how you can, right here from the UI, you can actually close that. So the front is open, or the hood as it were. You tap this and boom, it closes. And as you can see on this really realistic depiction of the vehicle, the tailgate is in the down position. You do have to manually raise that. Today there's no power function for it, so I'm just gonna leave it as it is, so we don't really need it right now. But you can tap to turn on the lights in the bed if you'd like. You can also see the status of the door locks here. You can open the charge port, you can open gear tunnel doors. You can close the tonneau cover, but keep in mind, we don't really want to do that, especially for this trip, because it's really, we just want to leave those open. There's a couple different ways you can adjust the mirrors and the steering wheel. One is just by simply touching the seat controls on the physical seat, and that will bring up this menu. It will bring up a menu for mirrors and controls over here, or you can come in here. So to adjust the steering wheel, in and out is, or this is up and down, in and out is over here. So you can really get a very nice fit for pretty much everyone. Same thing with side mirrors. These same controls now are being used to go up and down, and then this is left and right. And then the left buttons control the left mirror. So it's very natural, especially once you get used to it. I don't think you'll be going through the car wash. We do have this cool car wash mode, so when you tap this, it actually makes sure that the doors are locked, that the charge port is not only closed but also locked so it doesn't accidentally open. It just enables you to just be a little bit kinder to the vehicle so you don't have anything accidental happening with water intrusion or damage. If you want to review your gear guard footage, you can actually come in here and see this. You can turn on gear guard. Right now we have it off because it's being parked in the shop, a lot of people walking around and stuff. But if you wanted to go ahead and go through videos, you can actually see all of the things that have been captured by gear guard, which is pretty cool. So it's a really nice, not only safety feature, but it's also just nice to know what was going on with your vehicle when you were not around. So coming back to the screen, that's pretty much the most useful things on vehicle control here. But if you want to adjust your lights, for example, the brightness of the display, that's here. If you like the dark mode, where everything actually goes black, you can really see the fingerprints there, which is unfortunate. That's the only real downside I've seen to touch screens. But if you want to adjust cabin lights, how and when they come on, if you don't want people to mess with the rear display, you can actually lock it out right here. And then it's not dark out, but you can have accent lighting, which is actually right here around the trim on the door. It lights and glows really, really nicely. It looks fantastic, actually. So I suggest leaving this on, but if it annoys anyone, you can always turn that off. This is some trip info. So if you want to, set your trip meter at the beginning to see energy consumption, I suggest doing that. This is over the last week or so. You can see, how far you've driven and how much in energy you've used. So this is kind of helpful for those who are curious about not just range information, but efficiency, because a lot of people are focused on, what is the range? Well, the range in this is around 316 miles under ideal conditions. That means 21-inch wheels and tires. This has 20s, which I'll talk about that in a sec. That means, really just being conscientious about how you drive. This is really, it's been surprisingly efficient to me, but it still consumes more power than like a smaller, lighter, two-wheel drive vehicle, of course. So if anyone wants to know efficiency information, this is the right screen to take them to. This will actually walk you through what the specs are for the vehicle. This is our large pack, which is 135 kilowatt hour. This says Adventure. Adventure and Launch trim are pretty much the same, other than a couple little things like that, to be honest with you. It shows the color, the interior color. This is Black Mountain, which is quite beautiful. It's black with all vegan leather surfaces. This is natural ash wood with a black stain on it. There are two other color options for the interior. One is Forest Edge, which is my personal favorite. It's like a kind of a light muted green leather with a walnut stain on the ash wood. And then we have Ocean Coast, which is an off-white, kind of light gray with like a bleached looking wood, which is also stunning. They're all fantastic. And then the wheels. So this has 20-inch all-terrain wheels. All of the vehicles you will be driving will have 20-inch all-terrains. That is kind of the best wheel and tire package for those who really go off-road and those who live in mixed climates. So the tires are rated for not just off-road and on-road, but they're also 3-peak mountain snowflake rated, which means they are considered a snow tire, which is pretty cool, if anyone's curious about that. Okay, so probably the next thing that's quite important to talk about is drive modes. So the vast majority of the time, you're going to be in all-purpose when you are on the road, and that will automatically should choose the standard ride height. So this is kind of like your bread and butter, day-to-day driving, and you can really use it for just about anything. Sport, of course, makes the throttle a little bit more aggressive. It lowers the vehicle down. It stiffens the dampeners. It just makes the vehicle much more, say, track focused. I wouldn't necessarily use that much. If you're on roads that are really smooth and really nice, you can give it a try, but all-purpose works really well. The other mode that I personally like a lot is Conserve. So Conserve decouples the rear motors to where you're just using the 2 front motors. And the thing that's nice about that is your efficiency goes up dramatically. I'm going to turn this down just in case it picks up any of this noise. It really dramatically improves your range, and you still have plenty of power. I mean, this has 835 horsepower when all 4 motors are engaged. The front motors have just a little bit over 400 horsepower combined. So you still have plenty of power to do everything that you need, short of going off-road and high slip situations and towing, for example. But this is really going to get you your best range number. So where possible, even off-road, I would suggest Conserve. Now, if you're in a situation where you feel there's any chance of your front tire slipping, or if it's dangerous or you're going down a really steep hill, you don't need to be in Conserve. It's better to have more control. So that's when I would suggest using our off-road modes, which I'm going to step on the brake real fast to wake this thing up. There we go. So when you flip into off-road modes, it opens another sub-menu. And as you notice, a couple things just happened. So the vehicle is actually raising itself. So the air suspension has just increased the ride height, or the ride clearance, I should say, by 11.5 inches all the way to 13.1, which is impressive. It's, really class leading on the market today. You can also toggle up to the highest mode, which is 15 inches of ground clearance, but I would caution against doing that. And here's why. First off, you're essentially using most of the dynamic range of the suspension when you go into highest mode. So you don't have a lot of up travel where the wheels can actually go up in the stroke of suspension. So it will ride a lot rougher. The other thing is it really is just not necessary. I mean, 13.1 inches of ground clearance is significant because the entire vehicle underneath is smooth. So there's no differentials hanging down. There's no drive shafts hanging down. There's no suspension bits hanging down. It's completely smooth. So it's an honest 13 plus inches of ground clearance from front to back. So that will be really your preferred mode, I think, for most things. If you needed to go into these other modes like soft sand, which I kind of doubt you would need, that would be like, sand dunes or the beach, rock crawl. Again, I don't think you would need that. But what that does is it really, it makes the throttle control much more aggressive to where you are disallowing wheel spin. So it will not want any wheel spin at all. And a lot of times off-road, you do want a little bit. So unless you're really doing like boulder fields, I would probably stay out of rock crawl. Rally and drift, they basically bias more of the energy and I'm sorry, the power, I should say, to the rear motors. So the front motors are still working, but at a much lower rate. So this biases power towards the rear to allow a lot more wheel spin. So you can get sideways if you want. You can do, this is really great in the sand, honestly. For most surfaces off-road, I do not like rally or drift, particularly if it encourages people to try to get sideways and hurt the trail. So we really have to be good stewards of the trail and reduce wheel spin whenever possible and just be responsible. So again, all-terrain mode is going to be your preferred mode here. You can toggle between soft and stiff on the dampeners. I like soft personally, some people like stiff. You can toggle between standard and high on your regen. So that's pretty much it here. I mean, I don't think you're going to be towing, but that's a great mode if you do. Here's your music. You know, you have FM radio, Spotify, TuneIn, Bluetooth, an equalizer. It's pretty self-explanatory. The sound system's pretty good. Like I mentioned, this has 19 speakers. The R1S, just fun fact, has 23, which is pretty cool. So over here, again, you're probably already going to be somewhat familiar with driving these, but if you're not, the way that you engage drive is you put your foot on the brake and then you just depress this one time. So that will put you into drive. If you want to go into reverse, same thing, foot on the brake, lift up here, that's reverse. To put it into park, you just hit that button on the end of the stock. If you've never driven an EV before, the regen braking will take a little bit of time to get used to. But basically what it is in a traditional vehicle, and again, I really like these comparisons with traditional versus EV vehicles. When you step on the brake pedal in a traditional vehicle, you are essentially using brake calipers to squeeze on rotors that are spinning at a high rate. And what that does is it dissipates energy through heat transfer. That's why brakes get hot. That's why they create brake dust. And so that's what slows your vehicle down. But when you think about it, that's wasted energy. In an EV, when you let off the accelerator, you don't have to push the brake pedal. That excess energy is normally lost through heat and braking is actually sent back into the battery pack through something called regenerative braking. So you will feel very dramatically as you lift off on the accelerator that the vehicle will start to slow. It's very, very cool, and it really helps maintain range, especially when you're off-road. So just kind of play around with that a bit when you first get going, and you'll get comfortable with it really, really quickly. Let's hop back out real fast. Just do a quick walk around again. So like I mentioned, you're going to have these 20-inch all-terrain wheels, which are really, really nice. They are fantastic off-road, really, really nice tread. And then here is that 3-peak mountain snowflake rating, which if you live somewhere where you're required to have snow tires in the winter, this qualifies, which is really great. So we have our front light bar, which indicates charging status. If you want, you can actually turn that off, but it lights up in this really cool green, which is fantastic. It also stays on when the vehicle's on, and it gives us a really nice signature. These are our headlights, which are called stadium lights, and they have this really incredible effect when it's dark and they're on. All the vehicles you're going to be driving also have the standard tow hooks. These are really, really beefy and rated for the weight of the vehicle. And as you notice, if you have to put a shackle in them, they actually have this little insert, so you can actually get further back behind there than it looks like you could. The rubber insert is for aerodynamic reasons. And then just to show you what kind of incredible clearance you have, this is just in our standard ride height. You can see, unlike most vehicles, it's completely flat. Now this is fantastic for off-roading, and it's a little bit unnatural if you're used to off-roading something with differentials, because the highest point of clearance is down the middle of the vehicle. So sometimes you're going to actually put large boulders down the middle, which feels a little bit weird at first. And one thing to keep in mind is the only real sensitive places to watch out for are the control arms. So those are the only thing that hang down a little bit low, and depending on where you're looking at, there are hydraulic lines and brake lines that are a little bit sensitive. So again, just remember to put obstacles either down the middle of the vehicle, or use your tire to drive straight over them and put the obstacle in between the front and rear wheels. Keeping in mind, this does not have rock sliders. This is actually not armored. Now it is a structural component, and it is quite strong, but this cladding can get damaged if you put an obstacle up into it. So just keep that in mind. Let's see here. That's pretty much it. We're going to go into more things in depth there in Oregon, but I just wanted to give you kind of a brief overview beforehand. If you want to review this, kind of one more quick thing. It's kind of relevant. charging. So when you are ready to charge the vehicle, it's this little 3-line hash mark right here. If you're going to do level 2, which is what you generally find at hotels, office parks, or at home, it's just this connector. If you need to do a DC fast charge, which is like the fastest way to charge, it's this little door right here. So you have to fold that down, and then you'll see the actual physical connector is much larger and will now nest in there. To close it, you can do one of a few things. You can just swipe your finger over. That closes it. If the door is open and you put it in drive, that will close it. Or like you saw in the UI, you can also toggle it off there. If anyone's curious about more safety features, so this has ADAS functionality, which is Advanced Driver Assistance Systems. As you can notice, there are cameras like everywhere throughout this vehicle. There are LiDAR, radar, sensors everywhere that really are constantly scanning the road there's also a sensor behind here. They're constantly scanning the road to watch for things like, people who are stopped or slowed in front of you. They're looking for people changing into your lanes. They're looking for pedestrians, cyclists even. And so this really has just a ton of safety built into it, both on the active side, meaning the advanced driver assistance systems, and also on the passive side, being that the front end is all crumple zones, and it's fairly heavy because it's a battery electric vehicle. So it's a little bit over 7,000 pounds. So when you combine all of those features, this is probably one of the safest vehicles on the road or ever made. Let's see here. Anything else? Key functionality, pretty straightforward. So you have your lock, your unlock. If you hit this twice, it will pop open the front, which is pretty cool. If you tap it 2 more times, it will close it, which is, I love it. It works great. And then one last party trick, when you lock it, it sounds like a bird tweet, which is pretty cool. So anyways, that's just kind of a quick overview. Hope that was helpful, but we will share a lot more when we see you soon. Have a good one. Bye-bye.